have one rule. I will only marry a rich man. What if the right man isn't rich? Then he's not the right man for me. Be careful, Grace. Sometimes the poorest looking person has the richest heart. We'll see.
Welcome to Nenya Folktales, where every story teaches you about betrayal, karma, love, and life's greatest lessons. If you love emotional stories with unforgettable twists, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Now, let's begin. Grace had always believed that life came with one simple rule: marry rich or struggle forever. It was a belief she had carried since childhood, and no one could change her mind. To her, a man's shoes spoke louder than his words. The car he drove mattered more than the kindness in his heart. And the size of his wallet determined whether he deserved a second look. Little did Grace know that one ordinary afternoon would test everything she believed. By the time she learned the truth, it would already be too late. The Saturday sun poured over the busy streets of Atlanta as Grace admired her reflection in the glass window of an upscale boutique. She adjusted her designer sunglasses, smiled at herself, and stepped back. "You look amazing," her roommate Lily said with a grin. Grace laughed confidently. "I know." Lily shook her head. "You really love expensive things." Grace shrugged. "Why shouldn't I? One day I'm going to marry a rich man. Then I'll never have to worry about money again." Lily smiled politely but said nothing. She had heard those words hundreds of times. Every conversation somehow ended with Grace talking about luxury homes, expensive vacations, designer handbags, or wealthy husbands. "Money isn't everything," Lily said softly. Grace turned and laughed. "That's exactly what poor people say." Lily looked away. She didn't like arguing. She believed happiness came from peace, honesty, and genuine love. Grace believed happiness came with a luxury lifestyle. The two women had been roommates for almost 2 years, yet they couldn't have been more different. As they walked toward the shopping district, Grace's phone buzzed. It was her friend, Vanessa. "Girl!" Vanessa squealed over the phone. "Remember that investment banker I told you about? He's going to be at the rooftop lounge tonight." Grace's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yes. Single. Handsome. Drives a Ferrari." Grace smiled even wider. "I'll be there." After hanging up, she turned to Lily. "See? That's the kind of man I'm talking about." Lily chuckled. "You don't even know if he's kind." Grace waved her hand. "If he can afford a Ferrari, kindness is just a bonus." Lily sighed. Sometimes she wondered whether Grace truly believed the things she said, or whether she was simply afraid of ever being poor again. Just then, a yellow taxi slowed down beside the curb. The driver rolled down his window. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are either of you heading downtown? I can save you a long walk." Lily smiled. "That's very kind of you." Grace barely looked at him. His shirt was clean but simple. The taxi looked well maintained, but it wasn't anything impressive. Without giving him another glance, she turned away. "We're fine." The driver nodded respectfully. "All right, have a wonderful afternoon." As the taxi drove away, Lily watched it disappear into traffic. "That was nice of him." Grace shrugged. "He's just looking for customers." "Maybe," Lily replied. "But he seemed genuinely nice." Grace laughed. "You always see the best in people. And you don't." Grace smiled without answering. In her mind, there was no reason to get to know a taxi driver when she believed someone far more successful was waiting somewhere in her future. Grace and Lily continued walking toward the shopping district, chatting about the party they planned to attend that evening. "I still think you should give people a chance before judging them," Lily said. Grace smiled. "I already do. I judge them the moment I see them." Lily laughed. "You can't be serious." "I am. A man who can't take care of himself can't take care of me." Lily wanted to argue, but she knew it would change nothing. A few minutes later, dark clouds suddenly covered the sky. Within seconds, heavy rain began pouring onto the streets. People rushed for shelter. Grace frowned as she held her designer handbag over her head. "My hair! Seriously!" Lily pointed across the street. There's the taxi from earlier. The same yellow cab stopped nearby. The driver lowered his window. You two are getting soaked. Please get in. I'll take you wherever you're going. Grace folded her arms. I said we're fine. The driver smiled politely. The rain is getting worse. Lily gently touched Grace's arm. Let's just accept the ride. Grace rolled her eyes. Fine, but only because of the rain. They climbed into the back seat. The taxi smelled fresh and spotless. Soft piano music played quietly through the speakers. Grace looked around, surprised by how clean everything was. The driver glanced at them through the mirror. My name is Jason. Lily. Lily replied with a smile. Grace remained silent. Jason didn't seem offended. So, where are you headed? Lily gave him the address. As they drove through the rain, an elderly woman stood beside the road, struggling with several grocery bags. Jason slowed the taxi. If you don't mind, I'd like to help her. Grace sighed loudly. We're already late. It will only take a minute. Without waiting for an answer, Jason stepped out into the rain. He carried the woman's groceries to her apartment building and refused the money she offered him. The old woman smiled gratefully and blessed him before he returned to the taxi. Lily watched quietly. That was really kind of you. Jason smiled. My mother always taught me that if you can help someone, you should. Grace looked out the window. You're going to stay poor if you keep doing free work. Jason chuckled softly. Maybe. Lily noticed that Jason never became angry. He simply kept driving. When they arrived at their destination, Lily reached into her purse. How much do we owe you? Jason shook his head. Nothing. Think of it as my good deed for the day. Grace raised an eyebrow. Nobody works for free. Jason smiled. Not everything valuable has a price. Grace stepped out of the taxi without saying thank you. Lily leaned toward the window. Thank you, Jason. I hope you have a wonderful day. You too, he replied. As Jason drove away, Lily could not stop thinking about him. There was something different about him. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply kind. Grace had already forgotten about him. Her mind was focused on meeting the wealthy investment banker that night. She smiled confidently. This is going to be the beginning of my new life. That evening, Grace spent nearly 2 hours getting ready for the rooftop party. She carefully applied her makeup, slipped into a stunning red dress, and admired herself in the mirror. This is the night, she said with a smile. Lily walked out of her room, wearing a simple blue dress. You look beautiful, Grace admitted. So do you, Lily replied. Grace grabbed her purse. Let's go meet my future husband. Lily laughed. You haven't even met him yet. I don't need to. A successful man knows how to choose the right woman. They arrived at the luxurious rooftop lounge overlooking the city skyline. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Grace smiled proudly. Now this is my kind of place. Inside, soft music filled the room as elegantly dressed guests chatted over dinner and drinks. Grace immediately began looking around for the investment banker Vanessa had told her about. There he is, Vanessa whispered, pointing toward a tall man surrounded by several guests. Grace straightened her dress. Wish me luck. She confidently walked over and introduced herself. The man looked at her briefly before returning his attention to another woman standing beside him. Grace tried again. He barely responded. Within minutes, he politely excused himself and walked away with the other woman. Grace stood there, embarrassed. Vanessa walked over. I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was seeing someone. Grace forced a smile. It's fine. But it wasn't. She hated being ignored. Meanwhile, Lily stood near the refreshment table, quietly enjoying the evening. As she reached for a glass of juice, someone accidentally bumped into her. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. I'm so sorry, the man said. Before Lily could answer, another familiar voice spoke. It's all right. Nobody was hurt. Lily turned around. It was Jason. He was still wearing simple clothes, though this time he was helping one of the event staff carry supplies. You, Lily said with surprise. Jason smiled. Looks like we keep running into each other. Grace noticed them talking from across the room. She walked over with a confused expression. "What are you doing here?" Jason answered calmly. "I was asked to help deliver some items for the event." Grace gave a small laugh. "I should have known." She looked at Lily. "Come on. We don't have time to chat with delivery drivers." Jason simply smiled. "I hope you both enjoy your evening." As Grace pulled Lily away, Lily looked back. She felt bad for the way Grace treated him. A few minutes later, the event host stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us tonight. We have one final guest arriving shortly. I believe many of you have been looking forward to meeting him." The room filled with excitement. People whispered among themselves. Grace smiled. This must be him. She adjusted her dress one last time, completely unaware that the night was about to take an unexpected turn. The lights dimmed as everyone turned toward the stage. Grace stood a little taller and fixed her hair. "This has to be the investment banker," she whispered. Vanessa smiled. "I heard he's one of the biggest investors in the city." The host adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we end tonight's event, we'd like to recognize the volunteers and workers who helped make this evening a success." Several members of the staff walked onto the stage one after another as the guests applauded politely. Grace looked disappointed. "I thought they said an important guest was coming." "They did," Vanessa replied. "Maybe he's running late." A few moments later, Jason walked into the ballroom carrying a small box. Grace rolled her eyes. "He's still here." Jason handed the box to one of the organizers and quietly turned to leave. Just then, an elderly man accidentally dropped his walking stick near the front row. Without hesitation, Jason rushed over, picked it up, and helped the man back to his seat. The elderly man smiled warmly. "Thank you, young man. It was my pleasure," Jason replied. Several guests noticed what had happened. One woman whispered to her husband, "That was very thoughtful." Lily smiled to herself. She was beginning to admire Jason more with every meeting. Grace, however, was unimpressed. "He acts like being nice is going to make him rich." Lily looked at her. Maybe he's not trying to become rich. Maybe he's just trying to be a good person. Grace laughed quietly. In today's world, being nice doesn't pay the bills. Just then, the event host returned to the microphone. "Thank you all for your patience. Our special guest has just arrived." Everyone immediately turned toward the entrance. A sleek black SUV pulled up outside the glass doors. Several security guards stepped out first. The room became silent. Grace's heart began to race. "This is it," she whispered. The doors slowly opened. A tall man in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit stepped inside. His face wasn't visible at first. As photographers rushed toward him, guests stood to get a better look. Grace smiled confidently. "I'm going to introduce myself before anyone else does." She took a step forward. Then the man finally lifted his head. Grace suddenly froze. Her smile disappeared. She stared without blinking. It can't be. Standing at the entrance was the same man she had dismissed as nothing more than a taxi driver. Jason calmly greeted a few people before walking farther into the ballroom. Grace felt her knees weaken. She could not understand what she was seeing. Before she could say a word, someone beside her smiled and said, "Looks like Mr. Jason knows everyone here." Grace's eyes remained fixed on him. Questions raced through her mind. Who was Jason? And why did everyone suddenly seem so eager to shake his hand? Grace stood frozen as Jason continued greeting people around the ballroom. She could not understand why so many wealthy guests seemed eager to speak with a taxi driver. Vanessa looked just as confused. "Do you know him?" she asked. Grace quickly shook her head. "No, I've just seen him around." Across the room, Lily watched Jason shake hands with several business executives. "Something doesn't add up," she whispered. Before anyone could figure it out, the event host returned to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us tonight. Before we conclude, I would like to invite a very special person to say a few words." The room erupted in applause. Grace smiled and looked toward the entrance again, expecting another guest to walk in. Instead, the host smiled and stretched out his hand toward Jason. "Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jason Carter." Grace frowned. Why is he calling the taxi driver on stage? Jason calmly walked forward as everyone applauded. Grace looked around the room. Nearly every guest was smiling with admiration. She leaned toward Vanessa. "Who is he?" Vanessa shrugged. "I have no idea." Jason thanked the host, accepted the microphone, and looked across the audience. For a brief moment, his eyes met Grace's. She quickly looked away. "Good evening, everyone," Jason began. "I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but since I've been invited, I'd like to say just one thing. Success means very little if we forget how to treat people with kindness and respect. Every person you meet deserves dignity, no matter what job they do or what clothes they wear." Grace felt a strange knot form in her stomach. His words seemed directed at her, even though he never mentioned her name. Jason continued, "Some of the greatest people I've ever met were those the world overlooked. Never underestimate someone simply because of their position today. Life has a way of surprising us." The audience applauded loudly. Grace remained silent. She could not explain why his words made her so uncomfortable. After the speech, several influential guests gathered around Jason, eager to speak with him. Grace watched as one executive laughed warmly with him, while another thanked him for attending the event. Lily turned to Grace. "He doesn't seem like an ordinary taxi driver." Grace forced a laugh. Maybe they hired him because he's good at public speaking, but even she didn't believe her own explanation. As Jason prepared to leave, an older gentleman in an expensive suit stopped him near the exit. He smiled respectfully and said, "Sir, your board meeting has been moved to Monday morning. The directors will be waiting for you." Jason nodded calmly. "Thank you. I'll be there." Grace overheard every word. Her heart skipped a beat. Board meeting. Directors. Sir. None of it made sense. She stared at Jason as he walked out of the ballroom. For the first time since meeting him, Grace wasn't thinking about his taxi. She was wondering what kind of life he was hiding. Grace could barely focus for the rest of the evening. The image of Jason standing confidently on the stage refused to leave her mind. As she and Lily left the ballroom, she finally spoke. "Something isn't right. How does a taxi driver have board meetings?" Lily smiled. "Maybe you should have asked him instead of judging him." Grace frowned. There has to be another explanation. The next morning, Grace was still thinking about Jason. While eating breakfast, she searched his name online. Hundreds of results appeared. Her eyes widened as she clicked one article after another. Every article mentioned the same name, Jason Carter. But none of the photos looked exactly like the man she had met. "Maybe it's just someone with the same name," she whispered. Lily walked into the kitchen. "What are you doing?" Grace quickly locked her phone. "Nothing." Later that afternoon, Lily was returning from the grocery store when she saw Jason helping an elderly man load groceries into his car. Afterward, he got back into the same yellow taxi. Lily walked over with a smile. "Hi, Jason." He smiled back. "Hello, Lily. How are you today?" "I'm good. Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you always help strangers?" Jason laughed softly. "Not always. Only when they need it." Lily smiled. "You're different from most people." Jason shrugged. "My father always told me that character is what people remember long after money is gone." They talked for several minutes before Jason checked his watch. "I have to go. It was nice seeing you again." "You too," Lily replied. As Jason drove away, Grace stepped out of a nearby store. She had seen everything from a distance. "You were talking to him again?" Lily nodded. "He's actually a wonderful person." Grace crossed her arms. "You're getting attached to a taxi driver." Lily looked directly at her. "I'm getting to know a human being." Grace laughed. "Don't come crying to me when you realize kindness doesn't pay rent." Lily remained calm. "Maybe, but I'd rather be with someone who respects people than someone who only cares about money." Grace rolled her eyes and walked away. That evening, she received a phone call from Vanessa. "Grace, Guess what? The company hosting last night's event is looking for a new marketing manager. The salary is incredible. Grace sat up immediately. Really? You should apply first thing Monday morning. Grace smiled. This could change my life. She had no idea that walking into that company would bring her face to face with Jason once again. And this time, there would be nowhere to hide. Monday morning arrived, and Grace woke up earlier than usual. She carefully chose her best business suit, styled her hair, and reviewed her resume one last time. Today is the day, she said confidently. Lily wished her luck before leaving for work. I hope you get the job. Grace smiled. I will. They'd be lucky to have me. An hour later, Grace arrived at the company's headquarters. The massive glass building towered over everything around it. She took a deep breath and walked inside. The lobby was filled with employees, dressed in professional suits. She approached the reception desk. Good morning. I'm here for the marketing manager interview. The receptionist smiled. Welcome. Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly. Grace sat down and looked around the beautiful lobby. Awards lined the walls. Large portraits of the company's founders decorated the hallway. Suddenly, she noticed several employees standing up at the same time. They all turned toward the entrance. Good morning, sir, they said, almost in unison. Grace looked up. Her eyes widened. Jason had just walked into the building, wearing another elegant suit. He greeted the employees with a warm smile as he walked past them. Grace quickly looked away, hoping he wouldn't notice her, but it was too late. Jason stopped beside her. Good morning, Grace. She forced a nervous smile. Good morning. Are you here for an interview? He asked politely. Yes. I wish you the very best. Before Grace could respond, a senior executive hurried over. Good morning, Mr. Carter. The board is waiting for you in the conference room. Jason nodded. I'll be there in a moment. The executive smiled respectfully before walking away. Grace stared in disbelief. She could no longer convince herself that all of this was a coincidence. Jason gave her one last polite smile before entering a private elevator that required a special access card. The doors closed behind him. Grace slowly turned toward the receptionist. Excuse me, she said quietly. Who is Mr. Jason Carter? The receptionist looked surprised. You don't know? Grace shook her head. The receptionist smiled. Mr. Carter is the owner of this company. He became CEO after his father retired. Everyone here respects him because he treats every employee like family. Grace felt the color drain from her face. The room suddenly felt smaller. Her heartbeat grew faster with every passing second. The taxi driver she had mocked, ignored, and looked down on was not just another employee. He owned the entire company. Grace sat in stunned silence. She could hardly hear the conversations around her. Every rude word she had spoken to Jason echoed in her mind. She remembered refusing his ride, mocking his job, and laughing at his kindness. She wished she could take it all back. Miss Grace, the receptionist's voice pulled her back to reality. The interview panel is ready for you. Grace nodded and slowly followed another employee to the conference room. She tried to calm her racing heart before stepping inside. 3 senior managers sat at one side of the table. Grace greeted them politely and handed over her resume. The interview began smoothly. She answered the first few questions with confidence. Then the conference room door opened. Grace looked up and froze. Jason walked in. Every person in the room immediately stood up. Good morning, Mr. Carter, they said respectfully. Jason greeted them with a smile before taking the seat at the head of the table. Grace's hands began to tremble. She lowered her eyes, too embarrassed to look at him. Jason glanced at her resume. Grace, we've met before. She swallowed hard. Yes, sir. You applied for the marketing manager position? Yes, sir. Jason nodded calmly. Then let's continue the interview. Grace answered the next few questions, but her confidence was gone. She kept wondering if Jason remembered the way she had treated him. After the interview ended, one of the managers smiled. Thank you for coming. We'll contact you after we've completed our evaluations. Grace stood up. Thank you for your time. As she reached the door, Jason spoke. "Grace, could you stay for a moment?" Her heart skipped a beat. She slowly turned around as the other managers quietly left the room. Now it was just the two of them. Grace took a deep breath, knowing the conversation she had been dreading was finally about to begin. Grace stood quietly in front of Jason. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. The silence made her even more nervous. Jason finally looked up from her resume. "Please, have a seat." Grace slowly sat down. She kept her eyes on the floor. "You seem uncomfortable," Jason said calmly. Grace let out a shaky breath. "I owe you an apology." Jason remained silent. "I judged you before I even knew you. I was rude to you. I looked down on you because I thought you were poor. I'm truly sorry." Jason leaned back in his chair. "Thank you for apologizing." Grace looked up hopefully. You're not angry?" Jason smiled gently. "I was never angry." His answer surprised her. "Then why didn't you tell me who you really were?" Jason folded his hands. "Because I wanted people to treat me the same way they would treat any other taxi driver. Most people don't know who I am when I'm driving. It reminds me what people are really like." Grace felt ashamed. "And I failed that test." Jason nodded slightly. "You weren't the first." Grace lowered her head again. "I don't expect you to forgive me." Jason smiled. "Grace, I forgave you the day it happened. Holding on to bitterness only hurts the person carrying it." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Jason stood up and walked toward the window overlooking the city. "Do you know why I still drive that taxi?" Grace shook her head. "My father started this company with one taxi. He never wanted me to forget where we came from. So every weekend, I drive one of our original cabs. It reminds me to stay humble and to respect every customer I meet." Grace felt a lump in her throat. She realized she had laughed at the very thing Jason was most proud of. Jason turned back to face her. "Your qualifications are good. The hiring committee will make its decision based on your experience, not on our personal history." Grace looked at him in disbelief. "You're giving me a fair chance?" Jason smiled. "Everyone deserves a fair chance." Grace stood up with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Jason. Whether I get the job or not, I'll never forget what you've taught me." As Grace walked toward the door, she paused for a moment. She realized that the richest thing about Jason had never been his company. It was his character. Grace left Jason's office feeling like a completely different person. She walked through the company lobby without noticing the expensive furniture or the elegant decorations. For the first time in years, money was not the first thing on her mind. She kept replaying Jason's words. "Character is what truly matters." Outside the building, Lily called her. "How did the interview go?" Grace took a deep breath. "It went well, but something much bigger happened." "What do you mean?" "I'll tell you everything when I get home." That evening, Grace shared every detail with Lily. She admitted how ashamed she felt for the way she had treated Jason. Lily listened quietly before speaking. "I'm glad you apologized." Grace nodded. "I spent so much time chasing rich men that I forgot how to be a good person." Lily smiled gently. "The important thing is that you've realized it." A week later, Grace received an email from the company. Her hands shook as she opened it. She had not been selected for the marketing manager position. She stared at the screen for several seconds before slowly putting her phone down. She was disappointed, but she was not angry. Deep inside, she knew she still had a lot to learn and a lot to improve. The following Saturday, Lily was walking through a neighborhood park when she unexpectedly saw Jason sitting on a bench after finishing his taxi shift. He smiled when he saw her. "Hi, Lily." "Hi, Jason." They talked for nearly an hour about family, childhood memories, and their dreams. For the first time, Jason laughed freely without thinking about work. As they stood to leave, he looked at Lily and smiled. "Would you like to have dinner with me sometime?" Lily smiled back. "I'd like that very much." Neither of them noticed Grace watching from a distance. She saw the genuine smiles on their faces and quietly turned around. For the first time, she did not feel jealous of Jason's wealth. She realized Lily had seen something valuable in him long before anyone knew he was wealthy. As Grace walked away, she whispered to herself, "I judged a man's wallet before I ever looked at his heart." She knew that mistake would stay with her for the rest of her life. Over the next few months, Grace's life changed in ways she never expected. Without the marketing job, she accepted a modest position at a small advertising agency. The salary was far lower than what she had hoped for, but she was grateful to have honest work. Every morning, she left home early and returned late, determined to build her future one step at a time. She no longer spent her evenings searching for wealthy men or attending luxury parties. Instead, she spent her time learning new skills and improving herself. Lily noticed the difference. "You've changed," she said one evening. Grace smiled. "I had to. I finally realized that no one owes me a perfect life. I have to earn it." Meanwhile, Lily and Jason grew closer with every passing week. Their conversations became longer, and their friendship slowly turned into something deeper. Jason admired Lily's kindness and honesty. Lily admired Jason's humility and generosity. One afternoon, Jason invited Lily to visit a community center his company had built for underprivileged children. Lily watched as Jason spent hours talking with the children, serving meals, and listening to their dreams. Not one person there treated him like a billionaire. To them, he was simply Jason. On the drive home, Lily smiled. "Now I understand why you still drive a taxi." Jason laughed softly. "It reminds me that titles disappear, but character stays with you forever." A few days later, Grace came across a newspaper featuring Jason on the front page. The headline praised his latest scholarship program for students from low-income families. Grace looked at the photo for a long time before folding the newspaper. She smiled quietly, not because she wished he had chosen her, but because she finally understood why people respected him so much. She looked at her reflection in the office window and whispered, "I'm still rebuilding my life, but at least I'm rebuilding the right way." She picked up her bag, left the office, and continued walking toward the future, one honest step at a time. 1 year later, life had taken each of them down a very different path. Lily and Jason had built a quiet and happy relationship based on trust, respect, and genuine love. They were rarely seen at glamorous parties or expensive events. Instead, they spent their weekends visiting hospitals, supporting local charities, and helping families in need. Jason never stopped driving his taxi on Saturdays. It remained a promise he had made to his late father, a reminder that no amount of success should ever change who he was. Grace was still working at the small advertising agency. Her life was far from luxurious, but she no longer complained about it. She had learned to appreciate honest work and the value of earning everything she had. One afternoon, while returning home after work, Grace spotted Jason's familiar yellow taxi parked outside a community center. Curious, she walked a little closer. Through the open gate, she saw Jason and Lily serving meals to children and elderly people. They were laughing with everyone around them, treating each person with kindness and respect. No cameras, no reporters, no audience. They were helping, simply because they cared. Grace stood quietly for a moment before turning to leave. She smiled to herself and whispered, "I finally understand." She understood that real wealth was never measured by expensive cars, designer clothes, or bank accounts. It was measured by humility, compassion, and the way a person treated others when no one was watching. As she walked away, she felt no bitterness, no jealousy, and no hope that Jason would ever be hers. Some opportunities, once lost, never return, but the lessons they leave behind can change a person forever. If Grace had one wish, it was not to become rich overnight, or to find another wealthy man. It was simply to continue becoming the kind of person she should have been from the very beginning. And from that day forward, whenever she met someone for the first time, she no longer looked at what they wore or what they drove. She looked at how they treated people, because she had learned that the richest hearts are often hidden behind the simplest lives. Thanks for watching. What would you have done if you were in Grace's shoes? Do you think Jason made the right decision? Or should he have given Grace a second chance? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from Nenya Folktales. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were Grace? See you in the next story.